Hey, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to day 2 of our 3-day mini course. Again, before we get started with our mini course, I want to encourage you to go ahead and sign up for Tech for the Rest of Us. If you're a non technical founder or an entrepreneur or just a business person who wants to understand some of the technical fundamentals to help you be able to communicate a little better, then this course is for you. By the end of this course, you'll be able to understand quite a few different technical fundamentals. You'll be able to walk away from the course being able to have better conversations with your team, being able to make different decisions, and then just understand generally what are some of the things that go into technological decisions for your company, whether you're building an app or whether you're working with legacy systems. I know that, some of you might be thinking, well, how does this course actually help with my specific business needs, right? Every business is unique. And this, of course, aligns with your goals differently, right? Our course is going to cover a broad range of essential tech topics, and they're applicable to any business in today's world. You're going to learn foundational concepts, and those can be tailored to your specific industry or business model. The course is going to be full of practical examples to show you how to apply these directly, and then we use a lot of different metaphors to help you understand them. Now, some of you may be asking, well, I've already got a tech team that's doing all this work. Why do I need to understand this? Cool, that's a great asset, right? But when you understand those technical concepts, it'll help you be able to communicate effectively with your team, making sure that whatever vision you have is executed, right? So, as a leader, it's really important for you to understand and grasp those technical concepts to make sure that you're asking the right questions, making decisions, and leading the team more effectively. Technology is evolving rapidly, right? And staying up to date is crucial. All of our content is current at the moment, and we will be doing regular updates. We'll also be bringing in some tech experts, myself, and other industry experts to make sure that the information is staying relevant and up to date. So, again, go ahead and click the link, sign up for Tech for the Rest of Us. But let's go ahead and jump into our mini lesson for today. And today we're going to be talking about LLM grounding, right? So, how can we use different approaches to actually make our LLMs a little bit more accurate? All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to do a quick lesson on increasing LLM accuracy. So again, let's just start off by talking about what an LLM is. So remember from our last video, LLM stands for large language model, and it's essentially an advanced AI that can understand and generate human-like text, but actually not just text, right? It can generate video at this point. It can generate images as well. And these models are trained on massive data sets, and essentially what they're doing is through mathematics, through statistics, they are able to learn different patterns and the nuances of language and understand what is being requested and then be able to generate pretty amazing responses from that. So, an example of that could be I want you to write an email in the style of this specific person, or it could be me, even, or you, just as long as you have examples of that, right? So, now let's then jump into agents. So what we're going to be talking about today is some different agentic approaches that can help you make your LLMs a little bit more accurate when you're working with them. So it's important for us to just define first, like, what do people mean when they say an AI agent? You can hear, or you may have heard people talk about agents. You may have heard them talk about co-pilots as well, right? And so when they're talking about an agent, what they're essentially talking about is a piece of software that can perform a specific task, right? And LLMs are perfect for this because in order for an agent to do that, they need to, number one, be able to perceive their environment. They need to be able to process information, and then they need to be able to take actions to achieve some goal that has been predefined for them, right? So an AI agent, number one, needs to be able to learn from data. It needs to be able to adapt to new information, and then it needs to be able to make decisions independently, and or collaboratively. And what that means is you can have multiple agents actually work together. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But the important thing here is just to understand that an AI agent is just a piece of software that uses AI to achieve some predefined goal. And you can juxtapose this to a co-pilot, where a co-pilot is going to be working collaboratively with a human in order to maybe just expedite something that you're already doing. So let's talk about like how this differs from how maybe most people are interacting with a large language model currently. So right now, usually people are doing what we call zero shot prompting. Zero shot just means they're not actually giving it examples for it to be able to pull from, right? And they're also not refining or changing the output, right? So usually in a zero shot manner, let's say that we're talking about creating an article. Well, in zero shot, we would just say, all right, I want you to create an article on LLMs as an example and their potential issues. And you would probably get a pretty decent response from an LLM, an article. But the thing is that it's probably going to be a little bit generic. It's much more likely that it's going to have potentially false information. Maybe it doesn't have quite that flavor or nuance that you need it to have. And so one way that we could actually, improve that is by giving it an agentic workflow. So an agentic workflow is essentially where we are taking a complex task and then we're breaking it down into simpler pieces and sharing those different outputs in order to create a better result. So if we use the same scenario where we're talking about let's creating an article, well, how would we actually break that down into some steps that we could create specific agents for each of those steps? Well, if we're talking about building an article or creating an article, then one thing that we may be able to do is potentially break that down into 4 different tasks, where we have one agent who's creating an outline, one that's actually doing a web search, one that then actually writes the article, and then another that proofreads the article. Now, when I'm talking about an agentic workflow, I'm talking more around the context of programmatically doing this. But if you want to test this out and see how your results will actually be better, I mean, you could do this in the user interface. So if you're using Gemini or ChatGPT as an example, then the next time that you needed to write an article, instead of just starting with the article, first ask it to create an outline, right? And then ask it to do a web search around that same topic, and then have it write the article, and then have it proofread the article that it wrote to you and find some ways to improve it. And what you'll see is that your results are actually going to be better. The output that you get, that article that you get is going to be better, right? Because you're prompting the LLM, you're actually giving it some different, you're actually just kind of priming it in a way, right? And so you get better results that way. But the cool thing is that we could set up, software that does this. So think about the implications of that. If you run a business where you've got this complex workflow, you could actually break that up into smaller tasks. And then there may be many of those tasks that you can use an LLM to actually achieve those goals, right? And this is super important because we're in this phase now where generative AI is no longer really like a new thing, but where we are now is that companies are trying to figure out, well, how do I actually use this in my day-to-day operations in ways that are safe, but also that are impactful? And I think this agentic workflow is a really great place for, or a good starting point of how we start to see actual like real world business examples. So let's talk about some different agentic workflows, and let me just make my head a little bit smaller there so you can actually read this if you'd like. Some different workflows that improve accuracy, right? So one is reflection. So think of reflection as having an LLM examine or think about its own work and then find ways to improve it, right? So you could have an AI, for example, revising or reviewing a draft document to create it or enhance its quality. One way that I actually use LLMs all the time, and I use reflection, is I will actually have the LLM, if I want to create a prompt, I will actually instruct the LLM to act as a prompt engineer, and then I will have it review the prompt that it just gave me. And I'll do that a few times and you end up with better results. Now, another agentic workflow that improves accuracy is tool use. So imagine having maybe just external tools that you're able to use or the LLM is able to use. And this helps ground the LLM or give it data so that the results are like more factual or more context based. So one easy way to think about this is web search. So continuing along our example of creating an article, right, or some type of post. Well, imagine how much better it's going to be if we could actually have some function that goes out and searches the web and then brings that information back to the LLM in order for it to be able to evaluate it or use it when it's creating that data, right? And so this just allows the LLM to collect real-time additional data. Now, another agentic workflow that improves accuracy is planning, right? So now, instead of just asking the LLM to create an article or an essay or whatever, what you actually do is you tell it to create a plan. So say, hey, I want you to create an outline for this before you actually start to build it, right? And then you could even have the LLM generate one section at a time so that you can iteratively work with the output and make it better or just improve it, right? Now, the last one is multi-agent collaboration. So all of these different approaches, imagine going back to our example of the essay. So imagine that we have separate sort of software entities and they're all working together. So we have a researcher, we have a writer, we have a editor or a proofreader, right? And all of those different agents then can share output and work together. So think of it as, someone or the first researcher goes out and uses a tool to go and do a web search, and then they summarize an article, and then the output of that is then given to the writer, right? And that writer agent can then write the article, pass that output then to the proofreader, and the proofreader can then edit, make any final adjustments before presenting that output to the user, right? So this is what we talk about when we mean a multi-agent approach, right? And this is how we start to break down really complex tasks, right? And still need humans in the loop, but we can start to break down these complex tasks and actually, have greater output. So what's sort of the benefit of using this approach, right? Well, we've already talked about most of them. It improves the accuracy and the quality of what you get from the LLM. It also enhances the ability of the LLM to then manage complex tasks. It also then increases efficiency, right? Because now we've got a way to iterate and brainstorm with the LLM. Now, there are some limitations to think about here. One is this is going to require more computational resources. So if we're talking about doing this programmatically, this is where we start to get into needing to have someone there to be able to code this out. If we're using tools, we're going to need somebody to code those tools potentially. Also, this is how we start to get into what's called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG for short. And then we're going to have to start talking about, databases and vector databases and embeddings. And ultimately this approach requires more computational resources. The other thing to think about here is when we start to work with multiple agents, we've got more moving parts. We may also be working with outside data. So that means that we're going to need to be careful, and we're going to need to have some type of monitoring involved to make sure that we're not introducing bias into those responses. But ultimately, this is a really great way for us to start taking business processes, taking things that we do repetitively in our everyday, and use LLMs to help us make that work. So that's our mini lesson for today. Again, go ahead and sign up for Tech for the Rest of Us. If you're non-technical, it's going to be a great resource to help you be able to speak the language of tech. and look forward to the third video that's coming along. And in that video, we're going to dive a little bit more into retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, right? And we'll talk a little bit about what that is. We'll talk about some other terms that are related to that you may have heard floating around on social media or in some of the videos that you've been looking at. And yeah, so talk to you soon, and good luck.